Someone was watching one of my videos playing the first contrapunctus from the Art of Fugue of Bach, and he commented, would I share my views on how I feel about playing this or while playing it. I wrote back that if he would ask me a few questions, give me something to respond to. So I have some questions here that he had asked. One was how to clearly execute every exposition of the subject. I'm a harpsichordist, so my answers are going to be mainly based on how one would do this on the harpsichord. First of all, that subject from the Art of Fugue goes through many changes. In the first contrapunctus, it's pretty straightforward. I think one thing you have to do, first of all, is to give an identity to that subject. What is it? How is it made up? You have your minor triad beginning, or the quick notes at the end. What do you think those all do, and how are you going to play that so that you play it with some sort of an identity? It's not just notes. It's notes that are doing something, and you've decided what you're going to do with those notes, what you want to convey with those notes. Then, of course, you're going to be reasonably close to that throughout the fugue to help its identity. I was very lucky. My student, I've been lucky in my students too. Some of them quite well known now. But my teacher was Putnam Aldridge, and he was one of the leading proteges of Wanda Landowska. So that's my lineage. He was a very strict teacher, as I gather she was for him. It's such a complicated, rich world we're talking about here. At that time, musicologists were still in the early stages of deciphering treatises and making theories about Baroque performance practice based on those theories. He was one of the first to do that. So I was very lucky to have him as a teacher. Anyway, as for subject in a fugue, he would talk about, for instance, pianists playing a Bach fugue, how they'll always play the subject a little bit louder. Or even harpsichordists would do something to stress it so that you would hear it. And he used to say, why are you emphasizing the subject? We know the subject. What's interesting is what's going on against the subject. So whether or not how important that is, relatively speaking, of what you're doing with the subject throughout the fugue is just one aspect of the performance. 2, how to articulate the entire piece, allowing for a historically accurate performance. Well, that's a red flag for me. I don't believe in historically accurate. And one of the most unfortunate things that happened in the performance of early music was when people first started getting historic. And that became the most important thing. Expression, nuance, subtlety, whatever you were doing, the art of the playing. All you had to do was be correct. Even the liner notes on an album meant even more sometimes than the performance. If you could say on the liner notes that you were using the British 3/4/3/4, 3/4 fingering as opposed to the 2/3/2/3, 2/3 fingering as opposed to modern fingering, and you put that in the liner notes, and you got points for that. It was accurate. You were using the accurate fingering. The playing was another matter. So when you're looking at the entire piece, the important thing is to know what it is and what is its affect. So is it a dance? Most of those pieces. A fugue is more than a fugue. What is it? It could be like the D major could be a French overture form. You can have all kinds of different things. Is it a minuet? What is your form if it is a dance? Then you want to know the doctrine of the affections. What is the affect? What is the mood of the piece? Those are the initial things to understand about a piece that should be clear in your mind, and then you remain true to that. There's very, very seldom that an affect changes. I suggest Googling Doctrine of the Affections. This was an idea that was written about a great deal at the end of the 17th century and the 18th century. It was a given. Everyone knew that music was an affect. A piece of music was an affect. What is it? It can get subtle and complex. It's not always that easy, but it's possible for you to get an idea. So if the kinds of ideas that you want to have consistent throughout the piece would be, first of all, these two concepts. How to maintain good phrasing of any fugue on a harpsichord. Good phrasing. Well, a phrase begins and moves and ends. You need to know that. And this brings us probably to the Kernberger rhythmic harmony. That treatise, you can get that also. It's on, if you Google, Putnam Aldridge, Kernberger. Kernberger was a student of Bach, and at the beginning of the treatise he wrote on rhythmic harmony, he says, I always like to think that includes Bach, we are concerned about the mechanical, rigid way in which people are playing fugues of all things. We think they have to be very consistent. And the fact that there are no resting points for the mind. So he's so concerned about that, he proceeds to develop a list of rules, basically for rubato, so that you know where a phrase ends. You know, you have the shapes of the phrases, and it results in a freer style, non-mechanical style of playing, where there are resting points for the mind. It breathes. There's lots to be said about all of this. I'm just giving you some very sketchy ideas. I'd be happy to discuss it further if you're interested. We could even talk about a specific piece if you like. How to perform any Baroque keyboard piece abiding by, quote, the rules, quote, of Baroque performance. I would say don't try. You don't want to play by the rules, but you need to know the rules. The rules change all the time. Somebody's always unearthing a new treatise that says the opposite of the treatise everybody else was playing accurately. So, and there were conflicting treatises. They didn't all agree. And can you believe that everybody was playing exactly the same, the correct way? I can't believe that times were that different then from now. Nowadays, of course, we may be more correct than they were.